What is going on, everyone? So I've been getting a lot of questions recently on videos and on Instagram about people trying to get into saltwater fishing and just having like some common questions that they're asking. So what I decided to do was put up a community post asking for your questions that you want me to cover in this video. And I have 5 of these topics I'm gonna go over in today's video. I'll make sure to list down in the description like a little timestamp to each one of the topics that I cover, so you can skip ahead to a certain topic if you wanted to do that. The most popular topic that people wanted me to cover from all their questions was tides, describing what are tides and how it affects fishing. The second topic I'm gonna cover is bait. And we're really gonna be talking about the bait that you go out and catch on your own. So we're talking about white bait, thread fins, greenbacks, pinfish, mullets, stuff like that. So I'll be talking about where and how to find it and what you can do to catch it. The third topic I'm gonna cover is the different steps that I go through before I even go out fishing on how to try and plan a successful trip for that specific day, looking at the different weather, wind, tides, seasons, baits, stuff like that. The fourth topic is another very popular one that people ask me to cover, and that's how to find new spots, or when you're in a new area, what to look for to have like a good day of fishing. So I'll be talking about the different types of research that you can do before you get to a spot, and also while you're out there, what you can look for to try and find a new spot. The fifth and final topic I'm going to be covering is lure selection. So based on a specific day or water conditions or anything, what type of lures that I would try and throw to have the best success for that day. If you guys have any other questions that you want to ask, make sure you leave it as a comment down below. I'll either cover it in a future video or I'll just try and answer it quickly in the comments. So let's start off talking about tides. Tides are one, if not the most important factors that you need to understand before you go saltwater fishing. Tides are caused by the gravitational pull of both the sun and the moon on large bodies of water. So what happens is, as the sun and the moon are rotating around the earth, they're pulling on the surface of the water and pulling water to them. And as they're circling around, that's bringing this like long period of wave of water across the entire globe. The moon phase also has an impact on tides. If it's a full moon or a new moon, there's going to be a larger variation in the highs and the lows, like very high tides and very low tides. It's roughly 5 to 7 hours. You can always kind of think about it as like 6, but it's going to be in between 5 and 7 hours of the range between the high tide and the low tide. So you get roughly about 2 highs and 2 lows a day. The range in the tide is also affected by where you are on the earth. So if you're closer to like the equator, you're gonna have a more neutral kind of variation in tides. Like here in Tampa Bay, we're gonna have maybe like a 4-foot swing between the high and the low tide. But if you go up to the northeast or like up to like Alaska or anything, you're gonna see much bigger tide swings up there. Like I know Alaska's got like 8 to 10 foot swings. It's crazy. When you're on the transition between the high and the low tide, when the water's really flowing in or out of an area, is when you're gonna have the most activity while fishing. It seems like on the slack part of the high tide and the slack part of the low tide, the fish are kind of like neutral and just kind of hanging out. They're not gonna be in so much of like a feeding mode. But while the water's flowing, it's bringing bait to them. It's just kind of moving them around and gets them very active. Also, another important thing, I've talked about this in my redfish fishing like tips videos and stuff like that. Fish will move with the moving water. So like I said, on the low part of the tides, the fish might be stacked up in these deeper potholes on the outside of the grass flats or outside of the oyster bars and mangroves and stuff like that, waiting for the water to move up so they can push up with the water. So you sit on the outside, and as there's enough water pushing up, the fish will follow that water up, and you can also follow the fish up. So you'll see them pushing up onto the grass flats from the outside deeper potholes and everything, pushing up toward the oyster bars and then to the mangroves. That's kind of like the steady progression, depending on your area, obviously, what you have. But the main thing is, with the rising water, the fish will try and follow that water into areas that they weren't able to get to on the lower part of the tide. Obviously, don't get stuck on low tide. Know when the high tides and the low tides are and specific areas. Don't be fishing an area that's just got enough water on high tide and expect to fish there for more than an hour around high tide, because if you get stuck out there, like I said, it's a 6-hour swing between high and low. So if you're stuck out there midway through to a low tide, you're gonna be stuck out there for 6 hours until the water gets back. So make sure, that's one of the most important things that I always do before I go out, is to make sure to check the tide and kind of plan around that. If you guys have any other questions about tides, make sure to leave it as a comment down below and I'll try and answer it to the best of my abilities. But we're gonna move on to the next topic in bait. So really when I'm talking about going out and catching my own bait, I'm really talking about 4 different species. It's gonna be greenbacks and threadfins, which are 2 different species, but they're kind of combined into the same white bait category, and they both work really well. We're also talking about pinfish and mullet. So for the majority of this time, I'm gonna be talking about white bait because that's probably the best bait around this area, and the one that I get asked the most is white bait. The first thing we're gonna talk about is how to find white bait. So if you have no idea where to look to try and find bait, one of the best ways and most reliable ways to find bait is to look for diving birds, especially pelicans. If you can find where pelicans are diving, then they're probably diving on bait. Where I've been finding it recently is on deeper bridge pilings and docks that have good flow during like a moving tide like I was talking about. That seems to be one of the most important factors in finding bait is moving water. Or a grass flat, especially if you can find a grass flat that's got like a channel or deeper cut somewhat close to it that can like push a good amount of water onto the flat. That seems to be where the majority of the bait's gonna stack up. So once you find one of these areas, either a grass flat or like a bridge or a dock or anything where there is bird activity and there's good flow, and let's say you get to this area and you don't see like literally the bait flashing or the bait jumping right away, what you can do is you can chum the water to get the bait to come to you. There's a lot of different bait stores that sell dry chum. It's like $4 for like a big gallon Ziploc bag of it, or you could make it on your own. I'm pretty sure it's just like ground up dry dog food or like fish food or anything like that. And what you do is you put it in a bucket and you kind of mix it with water until it gets a consistency of like Play-Doh or something like that. And you make balls of it and you throw it in the water and it kind of disperses into the water and clouds it up with all this fish food. And that will bring a lot of the bait to the boat. So I recommend just chumming straight for 5 to 10 minutes and then throwing the net, and then by that time you should have enough bait kind of surrounding your boat to get a couple good netfuls to fill your live wells. The most optimal time to go out and catch a lot of bait efficiently is right at sunrise, or maybe even a little bit before sunrise. Like right at first light and then right at like sunset. Also, if you're going out, let's say incredibly early, or if you're going out to do like some night fishing, you could also fit or try and catch bait on dock lights. Good sized white baits are gonna be on the outside of the light. So right on like the edge, you'll see them every once in a while just kind of dart in and out of the light. That's where you're gonna find it. You can chum there, or you could just throw the net a couple times, and that's also an effective way to try and get bait. So that's for greenbacks and threadfins, but it also works for pinfish, especially on the grass flats. If you're going for pinfish, just go to a grass flat, and pretty much as soon as you start chumming the water with that dry chum, pinfish will show up. Pinfish are extremely easy to find. You could also do the sabiki rig with them. Just tip the sabiki with maybe like piece of squid or shrimp, or I use like cut up pieces of gulp shrimp if like it gets cut by like pufferfish or the tail gets ripped off or anything. Keep that and keep it like in that liquid that it comes in, and cut it into small little squares and put that on a hook, and you'll absolutely load up a live well on pinfish pretty quickly. For mullet, it's a very visual thing. You'll see them jumping in the shallow water, usually by like mangroves, by these islands, oyster bars, stuff like that. Don't recommend throwing cast nets or anything by oyster bars because you might get snagged and that's an easy way to wreck a net. But like I was saying, it's a very visual thing. You'll see them up in the shallow waters. They travel in big schools. You'll see them jumping often. I don't really know why they jump, but they do. Kind of cruise up with a troll motor, or you could use like the main motor and just kind of slowly go up to these schools of jumping mullet. And once you get in the range where you can see the school, just throw the cast net on them and you'll be good to go. So the third topic I want to cover is the different steps that I go through when trying to plan a day ahead of time. This could be the most overlooked aspect of trying to have a successful day, because I have plenty of friends, Jordan, who will go out and not check the tides, not really check the wind or anything, and just will get out there and just be thrown through a loop when they're trying to go out there and catch a specific fish. So the first thing I do before I even like really try and plan a day at all is I'll check the weather for that day. Obviously, if it's gonna be pouring rain and lightning and everything, then that's gonna be a no-go for that day. But also another important thing that I wanna check when I'm doing this is to check for the wind. One, to see obviously how strong the wind's gonna be, but really the most important thing for me is looking at the direction of the wind. That really helps me decide before I go out what spots that I wanna hit. For me, I have the power pole in the back, and majority of the time what I do is I'll power pole down and use the wind to my advantage so I can position the bow facing the spot I wanna be and make long casts to the area. And that's where it comes into play. You wanna make sure you know the wind, know the direction before you go out so you can have a game plan on where you wanna go. The next important thing, obviously we've already talked about this, is tide. So if you wanna fish a certain area, obviously if it's in shallow water, you probably can't if it's a low tide. And also, this comes into factor with, like I was talking about with the slack tides. Look for times that's gonna be moving. So someone asked me on a recent video, they're like, what time do you usually go out fishing? And I told them, like, I always try and aim as early as I can, but it's not specifically going for a time. It's trying to hit like a specific part of each tide. So the next important thing when trying to plan a day is obviously to plan what baits you're gonna use for that day. So if you're going out and you want to go catch redfish on cut bait, you need to make sure you can go out and catch the pinfish or the mullet or the ladyfish or whatever you're using for cut bait for that day before you can go fishing. And then the fourth thing is, when I'm trying to plan it, obviously you want to target something that's in season or at least biting in that specific time. So let's say you want to go out in December here in Tampa Bay and someone really wants to go catch tarpon. Obviously that's probably not going to happen because tarpon season for us here is in the summer months. So you really want to make sure that when you're going out, you're targeting something that is biting at that specific time, just to make sure you have a successful day, obviously. So the fourth topic I want to cover, and this is a very important one for a lot of people, is how to find new spots or what to look for in a new area. So when you're looking for a new spot or you're fishing a new area that you've never fished before, the best thing you could do is to research ahead of time. The best way to do this is to go on Google Maps. If you can go on Google Maps and kind of look around the area, look for areas that have islands, mangroves, anything that looks good really, grass flats, bridges, docks, anything like that. Another thing you can do is to look up fishing reports or forums on that specific area. So in the Tampa Bay area, I know there's a ton of different captains that put out forums, fishing reports, stuff like that. And just like a lot of people, a lot of Facebook groups and stuff like that you can look into, put out some really good information on general areas. Not a lot of people, like no one's gonna say specific spots obviously, but people will give you general ideas of what to look for to find these fish. And then you take that information and then you go into Google Earth and then you can look at areas like what the people are talking about where they're finding the fish. Another thing you could do, kind of going around that idea, is local tackle shops in the area is a good place that you can go in, ask the people working there, maybe talk to some people that are just walking around in there too, and just kind of ask them like, hey, what are you going for today? What's been biting recently? And they'll oftentimes give you like enough information that you can go off of to try and find some good spots. Another thing, obviously, you guys are here, you're on YouTube, is to look for local YouTube videos and just try and get knowledge from the people that are already fishing that area on productive areas. Maybe not like knowing exactly the spots on where the people are fishing, but to take the information like, oh, they're fishing mangroves, oh, they're fishing oyster bars, islands, passes, stuff like that, and they're catching these fish at this time. You can use that information and then go into Google Earth and get an idea of that specific area that you're gonna go fishing and try and find areas like that to apply the information, the knowledge that you got from the videos, the forums, everything like that, for your own advantage. So that's a research that you do ahead of time. You get like a general idea of like where you want to go and what kind of looks good and what's been working for other people, and then you take that information and then you actually go out fishing. And once you get out there, then that's when you can really dial in on what spots are going to be the most productive. You want to look for structure. That's going to be one of the main areas fish are going to be conjugated around the structure. And you can look for mangrove roots in the water, oyster bars, docks, bridges, jetties, anything that could attract bait, which will attract the fish. And that's the next topic. You want to look for bait in these areas. It could be mullet, it could be pinfish, it could be whitebait. And you get to these areas and oftentimes the predator fish will follow the bait. So if you can find an area that's holding a lot of bait and a lot of structure, you're probably gonna find some predatory fish, some redfish, snook, trout, tarpon, stuff like that. Looking at a new spot or like a new area, or even when you're going to like a spot you've always been to. I've had some people ask me like, what's the best way to approach a spot when you're getting to it? And honestly, the best answer I have is as quietly as you possibly can with your given situation. So let's say you're on a boat and you have a trolling motor. I would stop using the outboard as far away as you really can and use the trolling motor to ease your way up to the spot. Try and position yourself as far away from the spot as you can while still being able to make accurate casts. So obviously that varies for everyone with different setups that they have and everything, but I always try and be as far away as I possibly can while still being able to make accurate casts, because you want to not spook the fish at all and you want to be as quiet as you possibly can. So the fifth and final topic that I want to cover today is my thought process on going about selecting a lure for a specific day. So first one I want to talk about is throwing topwaters. So I throw topwaters in low light situations. That's where I found the most success. Obviously you could throw it pretty much all day and you might still catch some fish during the day on topwater, especially trout. Trout will hit topwater all day, but it seems like redfish and stuff kind of like the low light situations. As soon as you're like at that point of the day where it's like, oh, I should probably put my sunglasses on because it's getting a little too bright, is when you should probably switch from a topwater. Because think about it, if you're a fish and you have to look up to find the topwater, and if it's super bright, you really don't want to be looking up in like the sun or anything like that. Once you take the topwater off and the sun starts coming out a little bit more, that's when you move to more of like your miridines and your jigs or your DOA shrimp or anything like that. We're working more of like the middle or the bottom of the water column, because that's where the fish are going to be the most active in the middle of the day. The next thing I want to talk about is water clarity and how that affects drastically what colors I like to use when fishing. In darker water, I try and throw a darker bait, because then you have more contrast for the fish to have a better chance of seeing your bait, because that's the whole thing. You want to be able, the fish are always going to be able to like feel the bait with their lateral line and stuff like that, but they also need to be able to see it for them to eat it. So a darker bait is going to contrast a little bit better in darker, murkier waters. So something like this root beer DOA shrimp, I don't know if you guys can really see that. This root beer DOA shrimp is a good option to throw in a little bit darker water, because that will contrast very well in that water. You could also throw something with like a chartreuse tail or really like bright colors, because the whole motto is in darker water, you just want the fish to see it. If you're fishing an area where the water clarity is pretty good, then that's when you move to your more natural colors, trying to imitate bait fish or shrimp or whatever you're trying to imitate, because then the fish have the time to really look at it and analyze it really before they hit it. So you want something that looks realistic to the point where they're just going after it to eat it. Thank you guys for watching this video. Obviously, if you guys have any questions on any of these topics, or really questions or topics you want me to cover in future videos or something, leave it as a comment down below. I'll either get to it in the comments, or like I said, I'll bring it up in a future video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That would really mean a lot to me. If you guys want to see more videos like this, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. I can't hit it. Specifically, is think of giant waves, and so, or I'm trying to think of like a good way. Go ahead, ask them in the